Yeah, Ashley with Johnson Controls. Been with JCI for 10 years. Started off actually on the Tyco fire side, so when Jim was talking about building control, I'm like, building code for fire, I understand all that stuff. Switched over to Johnson Controls, big company, so we do, yes, our HVAC in New York and building automation, but we also have the energy performance contracting side, or ESCO side, so energy services. So that's what we're here to talk to you about. So I've been doing that for 4 years, and then did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, Mark Bassini. I'm also Ontario and Eastern Canada, engineering manager of Johnson Controls, so I help with project development. I'll work with salespeople such as Ashley. Am I loud enough? Yeah. Salespeople such as Ashley, just to meet with customers, understand their needs, figure out how we can help them decarbonize their buildings. Sometimes it's a decarbonization project, sometimes it's a payback project. Then develop sort of the concepts, and then from there, if it moves forward, then we'll work with engineers and contractors to actually design and implement the project.
All right. No, not working.
This one's working.
I know, but I don't
Oh, you
want
want
to
to walk
stay
around.
Hello? Oh, there we go. All right. All right, so what is an energy service company? So an energy service company partners with organizations to do deep energy retrofits. So we work from the concept right down to the energy audit, to design, execution, and then also guaranteeing the outcome. So we work to modernize and replace aging infrastructure, improve energy efficiency, which we're all talking about here, tackle CO2 emissions, and just Johnson Controls is an ESCO, but there are, for instance, 10 qualified ESCOs from Anarcan and then other ESCOs as well that are out there. So this is not Johnson Controls proprietary technology or anything that we have here. It's just a different solution as a means to getting to the end. And you can also think of us as a specialized general contractor. All right, so you have a whole bunch of different facility priorities when you're looking at your facility, and sustainability is very important, but you also have aged infrastructure. There's different issues that you have, and how do you prioritize them all? So some of the common facility priorities we see here, if you're looking at attracting new talent, deferred maintenance, modernization, asset management, climate resiliency, they're all pushing down, and a lot of them integrate together, but how do you determine which one you're going to tackle? How do you actually get there? So that thing is, you're sitting there with all these priorities, but there's different barriers that are facing them. So funding being one, we had talked about that. Time, dedication, there's the outcome risk. So you get these studies done, and they're great, and they say, hey, if you do A, B, C, you're most likely to get this outcome. Most likely, but it's not necessarily a guarantee. So sometimes you just kind of pull back, and I don't know if I really want to get this done, because I don't know if it will actually yield the results that we're looking for. There's also competing priorities. Like we said, there's different priorities that you have there, so which ones do you tackle? And then also just necessarily having the time, dedication, technical expertise to be able to execute those things. All right, so I've acknowledged that you have priorities. I've acknowledged that there's barriers to them, but really, what's the cost of inaction? So what happens when you don't actually take action on these priorities? So that's a lot smaller than I thought, so I don't know if you guys can see that. But there's extra cost to utilities, so we had talked about that, and it was a common theme that everyone's had there. There's carbon tax. A lot of people aren't aware that right now it's $65 a ton, going up to $170 a ton by 2030, and it's only going to keep continuing. There's also the failure of equipment. So what does it mean when you're not addressing that deferred maintenance and you just keep waiting? What is the actual cost when you have to now do a Band-Aid solution? The other thing that I'm seeing constantly is studies. Lots of studies. And the studies are great, but when they just sit on a shelf and they don't actually hold any weight, then what does it actually mean? So they just sit there, then you're missing your targets. We've heard about that as well. And then also there's increased deferred maintenance. But this is just the start of it. So that's the beginning of the cost of inaction. But what does it actually lead to? There's different safety concerns, so we did talk about that. Less money for other upgrades and other priorities that you want to have. Raising the cost, less profit. So who here has converted their LED lights at home or recommended in a building because, hey, it pays for itself? Right. So same concept that we're going to use here, but on a larger scale. So what if you leverage the savings for the LED lights, but actually did it on a bigger scale, looking for deeper energy retrofits? So what we do as an ESCO is we look at finding the savings, again, sorry for the small font, but looking at things like LED conversions, domestic water savings, building automation, HVAC, looking at your aged infrastructure that needs to get upgraded anyways, and we leverage those savings to be able to get more done. So that's kind of a little all-encompassing. So what does it actually mean? So when we look at a building, we can look at a building or a subset of buildings, but let's say it's a building for the sake of argument here. We look at its current operational costs, and typically if you're looking for like a 10 to 20 year payback, you can only find 20 to 35% worth of energy savings. So then you leverage those savings, you stretch them out over a longer period of time, and you use those savings, so those O&M savings, to now pay for that capital jobs that you have done. And then afterwards, once it's all paid off, it's now operating at a lower cost of repayment. Now, I don't know about you, but I work better with examples and numbers, so, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So let's say a facility has $1 million worth of utility spend, so that's their O&M, they're paying for your gas, your hydro, your water. If we can find 20% of energy savings, that's $200,000 a year. So facility is now guaranteed operating at $800,000 a year as opposed to $1 million. So you go 10-year payback, it's $2 million. So now you're going, okay, now Ashley, I gotta pay back $2 million. You didn't really help me. But keep in mind, you were always budgeting, or your clients were always budgeting $1 million. We are now guaranteeing, when you partner with an ESCO, that you're going to be operating at the equivalent of 800. So you use that $200,000 savings and you pay back the loan. 10 years later, it's all paid off and you're now operating at a lower cost of payment. The key is it's guaranteed, like I said. If there's a shortfall, we are obligated to cut a check for it. So that's where that risk transfer goes to for a partner. But it's not a cookie cutter solution. You can take those same savings, and if you're looking for a deeper energy retrofit, you can do things, and you can do it for a 20-year payback if it makes sense. And we'll talk about how D&D does it as well, because they were talking about their energy performance solutions, and that's what they look to do as well, stretch it out a little bit longer. And now you can get a $4 million job done, and you look at things like building an envelope, CO2 reduction, battery storage, if it makes sense. All right. So like I said, this isn't just Johnson Controls. There's a bunch of different ESCOs that are out here, some that are here tonight, or today I should say. So it's really about a different model here. So we're working at using your existing budget versus capital outlay. Items like grants and rebates are often supported by the ESCO industry. The savings outcome, cost, guarantee, and risk, it's all transferred over as opposed to you having to get a study, hoping that it's executed this way. We're guaranteed that that result is going to be there for you. The equipment selection, we're also looking long-term, not just the immediate future, right? As in most general contractors might be looking at things. So just checking a box, we're there for the long haul, so we're looking for the best value, working most qualified, and then something that's a really good sale point when it comes down to the end user is you can get the job done a lot quicker as opposed to piecemealing it with a 5, 10, 15-year plan on getting that job done. So I'll pass it over to Mark for some examples.
This yet? So we have some case studies here. So CFP Halifax, Mike was talking about this earlier. It achieves around 22% GHG savings. We are modernizing, with a lot of typical D&D bases. There is a lot of equipment that needs to be upgraded. It is a challenge for them to really upkeep their equipment. So these projects are great for, achieving your capital renewal and GHG and energy savings at the same time. So the types of things we're doing there, Mike touched on this, lighting upgrades, recommissioning are the two biggest. So about, more than 50% of the savings are coming from the lighting and recommissioning, and that helps to fund the rest of the projects. So we have a little bit of building envelope. We have solar walls, which is the solar air heating, the perforated cladding. So even in, Nova Scotia, you would think that there isn't enough sunlight hours here, but compared to other areas of the country, it's not that much different. I think it's within 10% of even a lot of parts of Ontario, according to Red Screen and the available solar data. So it's not, it's still a good technology to use, and it's virtually maintenance free. It's just cladding, right? So that can be a good one, especially if you have to redo your cladding anyways, which can be the case in these old buildings. New condensing boilers, you'd wonder why we're putting in gas. A couple of reasons. One is the feasibility study was done in 2019, and things have changed then, but with these DCC, D&D projects, it's difficult to change things sometimes. We did make changes on the fly, I guess you could say, during execution, but in some cases, it still makes sense to put in gas even when you're replacing oil. So we did install some gas boilers, extending gas lines, things like that. New chillers, a lot of R22 equipment that they're dealing with, so that's, it's good to get to that. They have a long list of R22 equipment they need to change, and getting ahead of it is a good idea because R22 is getting harder and harder to find since it's banned. So the more we can replace, the better. And when we do that, we look at options like heat pumps that's mentioned there. So this project includes things like condensing units that are being replaced with heat pump condensing units, so you can get some preheating out of it. We have some VRF units that are replacing typical cooling as well. We have air-to-water heat pumps with electric boiler backups. So it's got a good mix of all those cool projects, and some mini splits too. So pretty much every type of heat pump you can think of, we've done to a certain extent on this project. Some new air handling units as well, some heat recovery. So there's a good mix of projects here. And again, that's really enabled by the projects, because these projects don't have great paybacks, right? Like even the new chillers, and when you get into heat pumps, you can get some paybacks there, but it's still surprisingly long, especially with the utility rate structures in Nova Scotia. So it doesn't have a great payback. So you really need the recommissioning and the lighting upgrades to really, to help fit within that 15-year payback model that a lot of the typical EPCs have. And the recommissioning, like I like to tell people, my advice there is to keep it simple, because sometimes you can have really complex recommissioning measures with really ambitious sequences of operation, things like that. But then you go to implement it, and it's really tough to find someone who can program that properly, and then to just maintain it over time, and for people to understand it. So you really got to understand your customer. If they have facility staff that are dedicated and energy managers and all that, you can probably get a bit more ambitious. But if you're dealing with just a few maintenance staff and they're limited in their resources, keeping things simple is probably your best solution to keep things going over time. I don't mind if there's questions as we go too, because I think we're ahead of time here. So if anybody has any questions about these projects, feel free. Pictou County Wellness Center, another Nova Scotia project. So this was a pretty unique building because it was already completely electric, which was great. From a decarbonization perspective, although the electricity mix in Nova Scotia is a challenge right now, it is coming down, but at least you can buy offsets for that. But the issue there is they have electric boilers for backup, but they were, again, this is another controls issue, but the electric boilers ended up being prioritized all the time, even though they had heat pumps. So, it ended up being a good recommissioning opportunity there. Some heat recovery. I think I have it on the next slide, right? Yeah, there was some heat recovery from the ice plant to heat the pool and just improve the heat recovery system there. We did do a solar wall, lighting, so the ice rinks and the rest of the building needed new LED lighting. They didn't do any lighting yet, which was good. We actually installed some new cooling for dehumidification in the atrium, so some VRF units there, and arenas and dressing rooms. And then, the solar wall was for preheating air for the change rooms, because it's 100% makeup air usually for change rooms, right? So, and then the results are there, over 30% reduction in GHGs, really good annual savings, and really good incentives as well. So, and I think there's a possibility to get even more incentives, right? They're still
waiting on it.
Waiting on it, yeah. The federal government incentives can take a while to learn about. So, but if they do get it, there could be a more ambitious scope there as well.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
How old was that building before you started the recommissioning?
It's not very old. I think it was built definitely in the 2000s, but it could be like 2010.
Right, because
I believe.
I'm sure it looked new and
Yeah.
pumps and
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of capital upgrades there. It was more adding the heat recovery, like reconfiguring the heat recovery. I think they had some heat recovery from what I remember. But yeah, we optimized some of the heat recovery because they did have a heat pump loop. And I think we connected some, so what they were doing is they were using heat recovery to false load their heat pumps. But we actually are using heat recovery from the ice plant and directly using it to heat the pool because it's a pretty ideal combination. So we do that in a lot of rec centers because you get around 100 Fahrenheit out of your ice plant, 95, 100, and your pool needs 80 usually, right, in that range. So it's a pretty good, you know.
So they actually had to repipe.
Yeah, there was some repiping to do that. Yeah, we ran piping all the way across the building. For some reason, whenever they do these rec centers, the ice plant and the pool are at opposite ends of the building, almost always. So I wish that was a forethought. But yeah, it seems like we're always running pipes across the building because they're never like conveniently located next to each other. They probably want to keep them apart because of the different temperatures, but.
And I think that's a common thing, right? So that's the whole point, that the general contractor that built that, it was built to be efficient, but there was no obligation for it. There's no risk transfer there. So they were just checking boxes. And I mean, to have a facility that's 10, 12 years old and then to find that level of savings, it's ridiculous because no one was accountable. And
well, there's a lot of people that went in to try and resolve it, but again, it's like a little study here, a little study there. So then we came in and said, well, we're not only are we going to resolve it, we're going to guarantee it. So. And
was it, from the control side, was it that there were actual like physical components missing to control the plant properly, or was it that the sequence of operation was not?
It was more the sequences. Yeah, it wasn't. From what I remember, I don't think there was faulty sensors or anything. No.
Huh.
Yeah, sometimes it can be dead bands.
Yeah.
Simple things,
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good project. And sometimes the newer buildings actually have more opportunities than older buildings. I say that to people all the time because with the older buildings, there's like a sweet spot because after maybe, you build your building and you have a certain expectation of how it's supposed to perform, and then it takes you maybe a couple of years to realize it's not performing, and then you hire people to do studies and retrofits, and then a few years go by and you're like, okay, we really need to fix this. So like those new buildings, they can perform worse than the old buildings that have had 10, 20 years to resolve all the issues and fine tune everything. Go ahead.
I just have a question about your energy savings, your utility energy savings. Is it kilowatt hour savings, like energy use, or is it like kilowatt peak demand savings?
For this particular project?
Or just like in general, like I'm not sure about the rate structure in Nova Scotia, but do like these types of customers have like demand savings, and do you work to kind of lower that, or is it just kind of lowering energy use overall?
It can be both. In this particular project, there was some pretty good peak demand savings. So that was actually one of the measures, was reducing their peak demand. Just avoiding the use of the electric boilers definitely helps a lot with that. But I think the peak, it's not the worst here, but I think it's similar to Quebec, where your peak demand rate is, I think, in the $10 to $20 per kilowatt range, depending on your rate structure. So it's nothing like Ontario, where we have the GA, and it can be it used to be 600, 700 per kilowatt. Now I think it's half that, and maybe on its way back up again, but not the same opportunity there. But there can be some demand savings in some of the projects, yeah.
Before you transition to this one, so when I was showing the picture with the example, so this is a great example of an energy performance contract. So the savings pay for the project, but we're also here talking about deep energy retrofits. And the next one serves as a really good example of how we can guarantee not just the cost savings that you're talking about, but also the GHG reduction, which is something that a lot of customers and facilities are looking for. So it's not always paying for itself, but there's other risks that you're looking for as well, like hitting those 50, 80, 100% targets.
Another cool one here. This one was the first net zero rec complex, I think. Was it Ontario or?
I don't know if it's.
I thought I heard that.
It depends on how long the actual work takes place. So we've just been approved to start the actual construction with this. The design took quite a while. So
But it's net, is
It
it the
is net
first,
zero.
is it the first net zero rec complex or something?
it's in line to be,
It's-
in
okay.
terms of a
Yeah.
retrofit. There's lots of new builds that are
Yeah,
net
okay.
zero, but this one's an actual retrofit that's going right to net zero.
You should be saying this, you're the salesperson. I'm helping you here.
I can.
Okay.
Again, so it's just about the outcome. I'll let him go into the measures, though
Yeah.
I've lived and breathed it for the past couple of years, but it's really what's their goal here. The other one, so Pictou County, their goal is to pay less on their utilities. I would say that the carbon reduction was a fortunate side effect of the project. But this one, it wasn't looking for payback.
GHG goal, right?
They strategically looked at this facility because it was about 25 years old. So it made sense to look at the infrastructure renewal that they had to do anyways, and let's do it efficiently. So their goal was to target in line with federal, but it was 80% minimum GHG reduction over a 2010 baseline. It's in line for 91% reduction from the design, and then the last 9% is done through carbon credits. They are looking, their goal, I don't know if I have it on the next one, but the CAGBC, net zero.
The net zero certification?
Yes, so that is their goal.
So you can see here that there's a bike rack, so that'll help. for those of you who do lead and well, you know. We didn't put that in, but we will count it, right?
Sure, I'll take credit.
Yeah. So yeah, here's all the measures Ashley was talking about: rooftop PV, ground source heat loop. So again, yeah, ground source heat pumps don't always have the best payback, but when you have a GHG focused outcome, then it can start to make sense now, because it really helps to push the push your COP up essentially. Is compared to an air to water heat pump, right? So you're basically your advantage is your COP. Domestic water retrofits, LED lighting, AEECE resurfacer. Did they do an electric one there?
They did.
Electric Zamboni, I believe. Yeah.
2.
Yeah, heat pumps. Yeah, everything's there.
I would say like what's really neat about this, and again, the benefit of going with an ESCO is we're not trying to push any one technology. So it's nice because we're the one throat to choke in terms of the accountability here. So someone was talking about electric boilers, and it's not just as easy to go gas, let's do an electric boiler, because that's expensive. So what can we do? So this one, for instance, we looked at heat recovery from the ice plant, but then you don't, and I'm not an engineer, so I apologize in advance if I'm not saying this right, but you didn't want to lower the COP, the efficiency of the actual system, because a certain amount has to dump into the heat loop, and then certain of it we want to preheat the water for the ice rink flooding. But who's responsible for this, right? So there's a bunch of different technologies, and if you have someone, a sales rep, selling each one of those things, who's actually accountable on how this design all works together? So that's where that guarantee comes again.
Yeah, there can be a lot of finger pointing. Yeah, ground source heat pumps can be complicated because if you take out too much energy, you can freeze your ground, maybe is what you're saying, and you want to charge it just the right amount, right? So they can be complicated projects. And OpenBlue Digital Solutions is something we're getting into a lot now. It's a cloud-based solution just to track your GHGs and your performance over time. And there's like troubleshooting, and it's that really next level of AI. So it's the first kind of I think generation of useful AI that can really help you identify issues with your building operation and just how you're proceeding towards your targets.
And if you go back to that one, I can just
Yeah.
add a couple more things. So, I guess, here. Hello? Okay. So you can see here, so $200K in savings. This project's $32 million. There's no payback. So, again, it depends on what your outcome is. What is nice about it, though, is all those incentives that come with it. So when we're explaining to council, it's not a $32 million job to go green. It's $32 million to upgrade your infrastructure that needed to be upgraded anyways. And the good thing is about going green, there's over $25 million worth of grants and incentives on this one. So you wouldn't have that if you weren't thinking green in the first place. So just something else worth noting.
So they got $25 million for that project?
Yes, through various different grants and incentives, yeah. That's a lot. Yeah, and a lot of work for me too that I had to do. So it's nice too, because you guys don't necessarily always have the time to be filling out all these applications, but again, another benefit of partnering with an ESCO. I really do sound like a salesperson.
So is the total cost 32 and then minus subtract the 25?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questions? I think, oh, there was a question over there.
Who takes the risk for utility rate escalation?
Okay, so I'll start and then he can finish off. So we don't actually save the dollar amount. So it's a cost avoidance, and we have to put an assumed amount, including escalation, that would be assumed that we would come to terms with our partner at that time. So like 3% escalation, it depends on what you want to put on there. So we're actually saving the unit of energy, not necessarily the dollar amount.
So the risk is still by the
Yeah.
owner.
Yes, but
Utility
I mean,
rate is stipulated, and it's the units of energy that are guaranteed. Yeah.
but I mean, it's the cost avoidance that you're paying. It's what would you be paying if you didn't do anything?
Yeah, right.
And I mean, frankly, you know, as an account executive, that's one of the hardest things to get through to the end user, is really to understand, again, the cost of inaction.
We usually try to be conservative with that, but yeah, like Ashley said, usually 2 to 3% a year for electricity cost escalation. But yeah, sometimes people will mention, well, now there's a new Ontario electricity rebate, so what about that? So you know, that can cause your payback to get longer. But then over time, if utility rates increase at a higher rate, then you get a better payback, and we don't share in that benefit, right? So it's about finding the right balance. Same thing with the carbon tax, right? If there's a change of government, will it disappear? Who knows? Or, you know, because right now I think the more likely you know, scenario is that past 2030 continues to escalate towards $300, which is the shadow price that the government's using anyways. And if you look at a lot of studies, it's in that range of what's required to actually achieve the targets that they have. So.
And what you said too is, what's nice is, so in that example, the $1 million utility spend, say you were to save 25%, that all goes to you. It's not a shared savings model or anything like that.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Tough audience.
Where did you get all your incentives for, to get $25 million?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is all public knowledge.
Do you have their phone numbers?
Yeah.
So the federal government did do a program, the Green and Inclusive Community Building. So 15.7 came from that. FCM did increase theirs. So it was normally a max of 5, but for this project they did 10. It is a grant loan, so I made sure to say grants and incentives. So there was a loan portion, but it was $2.5 million free money, 7.5 low interest loan, and then there was also different rebates that are in there as well. And that's the one that when we're talking about picked up annual rating, I'm hearing back from GICD, but it was their second intake, and it's the federal government. Any other questions?